This step is finishing the SlowBipe. Before painting, you may want to sand the perimeter of the fuselage. I use a sanding block and about 220 grit paper. And just work your way around the outside. Until you come to a shape that you're comfortable with, and then everything's as smooth and clean as you like it. Painting the SlowBipe. To paint the SlowBipe, you will want to use a paint that is safe for the foam. The SlowBipe is made from Depron, that is the white foam, and from a blue core foam that makes up the core pieces of the fuselage. The blue pieces are more sensitive to some paints than others, and I have found that the Shortcuts paints work really well. Here's a picture of those. And there's 4 colors that I like the best because they're really bright. There's other colors that work well also. The pink, yellow, the blue, dark blue. This one they call ocean blue, and red. It's just pepper red. I think it's sun yellow, and this one maybe is what do they call this? Hot pink. So anyway, I'm going to demonstrate how to paint the fuselage. Whether you're building the 3-channel or the 4-channel SlowBipe, you'll want to start by installing the rear or the servo on the single side first. That's the left side of the plane. You'll see there's only one spot here for the servo. Feed the wire in and pull it through the other side, and take the servo arm, and then install it down in the pocket. Just kind of work it back and forth until you get it in there. Be careful as you do it not to crush the foam. And then eventually we'll just slide right down in there. Make sure you support the plane from behind as you push it in so you don't crush anything. And it is a tight fit. So let's do it one more time here. Put both fingers on the servo and push it into place. And it'll just seat down there nice and tight. Once it's in position, it won't go anywhere. Next, we're going to install the rudder servo. This will go in the top hole on the right side of the plane where there's 2, and it will feed in. Just feed the wire through that slot up to the front. You can turn the plane around and pull the wire through, get it all slack out. And you see then, just like that. Then you take your servo, and just like before, you kind of work it into the hole carefully, trying not to crush any foam, and then press it in gently with both fingers until it goes all the way in. And this will be our servo for the rudder. Now you can see there's another hole at the bottom. This would be the servo for the other elevon if you were building this in 4-channel mode. As you can see here, I have a motor and ESC that are already wired. Yours may have plugs in between, which make this job even easier. I'm going to first feed in the wires coming off of the speed control in through the hole. That's the power wire and the servo wire. I'll reach in the other side and grab those and pull them through to the hatch door, which I'm doing with my other hand. And then the speed control, when it comes up to here, it will just slide right through that 1-inch wide hole, just like that, to pull, and then you can pull it all the way through. Then the motor comes up, mounts to the firewall, and the wires drop down into the slot on the side of the fuse. The firewall on the SlowBipe has been pre-drilled with holes to fit the power-up 400 motor, in this case the 400 SlowFly, but the other power-up motor by Heads Up RC would work as well. It also has holes drilled to fit the Emax 2822 motor. I'm now going to install the 2 screws that are supplied. The kit does come with 2 motor mount screws, and you only need 2 to secure this motor. So I'll put the first one in down below here, and tighten that down most of the way. Now I'm going to start the second screw. Okay, make sure I find the pocket. There we go. And that's started. And then I'm going to grab a flat screwdriver. It will get a better grip on these screws when tightening them down. A small flat. And I can run those all the way down into the firewall until they're snug. There's one side, and a little bit more on this side. There we go. Now the motor's installed. As you look on this side, you'll see that our speed control is still hanging out of the plane. And the best place to put that is going to be on this above this shelf that is at the top of the battery compartment. That allows the speed control to be out of the way of your battery and gives you lots of room to work. It also is right behind the cooling holes on the nose so that airflow can move across that and keep it cool. To get those wires to travel up over the top of that shelf or that plate, you can use one of the elevator control wires. It has a great little hook on the end to reach up there and pull the wires down from the other side. Like right here, I'm grabbing a servo wire from the, not a servo wire, but the wire from the ESC and pulling that through. Now we've got to feed the power wire in there as well to get it over the back. I mean, I don't have to, but that's where I would prefer it to go. So I'm going to feed it over the top. Again, I'm going to use the this elevator wire to pull it out, to pull it through from there. And if you can't get a good grip in that direction, you can actually come in from the tail here, right in the back, and there's open access all the way to the nose from there, in which you could go in and hook onto it with this. As you can see here, I've installed the three servo plugs into my receiver, and the receiver is then ready to push up into the compartment in the back of the plane. If your receiver is small and light, there's no need to secure it. It'll just sit there in that little space and stay put based on the tension from all the wires around it. You can leave the power wire free so that it comes towards the front of the plane and is ready to plug into your battery pack, which will sit up in this position. First, you find the rudder carbon rod. It's right here. This inserts into the rudder through the two bearing holes in the rudder control horns. And then there is in the pack there should be at least 6 of these short pieces of fuel tubing that are used to slide over the top of the shaft and retain it. It fits in this pocket right here over the top of that rod. And I'm going to take that here, I'm going to set it over the top, and I will just kind of put it in place and then twist the rod and press up against the plywood plate, and that goes into place just like that. Now that we have the rudder shaft installed into the rudder with the fuel tubing at the top to retain that, we can now insert the rudder shaft into the tail block at the back of the airplane and press that all the way in until it hits flush. Now at this point you can also then grab the shaft from the bottom and pull it a little bit further until you get in as far as you want it, so there's as little play as you'd like to have there. It is a bit tight here. If yours is too tight, you have a couple of choices. You can take a screwdriver and use it as a spacer in between the end of the shaft here, and then use that to push it down in. Or you could also, let's see, okay, so that's in there nice and tight. It's a good fit. Anyway, that's probably the best solution. You could also loosen up the slot through the tail block by using a 1/8 inch drill bit and reaming it out just a little bit more. So anyway, that is the installation of the rudder. Now there is another piece. It's a little bit larger piece of fuel tubing that I place over the bottom, and just get a firm grip on the rudder control horn, and then you take and this piece here just just like this. It just slides right over the end until you get that to where you want it, so your rudder is installed and not going anywhere. So that will hold it in. This is the elevon installation. For this you'll need the fuselage and also the elevon shaft. This shaft slides through the slot, going horizontally between in the tail block, and it slides through. Move it in and put it in position where it's exactly halfway or centered, and we're going to say that's pretty darn close, so that you have the shaft sticking out equally on both sides. Before installing the elevons, I would take the control rod. You have the elbow bend on the end there, and I would pick which hole I'm going to install this in, and I'm going to use the center hole in the elevon, and I would ream that out a little bit by wiggling the rod and working it in. It is an exact fit. In other words, the hole is drilled the same as the wire size, so it's a little snug, and once you get it on the plane, it's a little harder to put into place. So if you work the hole a little bit and loosen it up a teensy bit before you start, that will help. And you'll want to do this for both elevons. Now that I have the elevon rod in place, the shaft, I'm going to slide the elevon down over the shaft and get it almost all the way on. And I'm going to take my control rod and I will feed it through the lower hole in the push rod guide on the side of the plane, and then when I come up here to the elevon, I am going to insert that into the hole that I want to use in the elevon control horn. So once you find the hole there, you press it through, and you can see it's in the slot and ready to go. So now you can take the elevon and slide it on the rest of the way onto the shaft. Now you have a moving surface hooked up to a wire that's going through a rod guide. So in addition to that, you'll want to take one of the fuel tubing pieces that are used to retain the elevons. You slide this out just a little bit. We'll put the piece in place, and then we'll slide it back in, holding the shaft so that it stays put, and this of course pushes the fuel tubing over the top of that. Again, to get it on further, we use a flat screwdriver, put it in as a spacer over the top of that, and press that tubing onto that rod till we get it to where we want it to be. Now the elevon is perfectly in place, it's tight, and it's not going anywhere. Now we're going to install the right side elevon, which is the other elevon here, and it will slide down over the shaft just like the first one did, and you would repeat the same process for hooking up a control rod if you were setting this up as a 4-channel plane. If you're setting up as a 3-channel plane, this elevon will be slave driven off of the other elevon, and so at this time this is the installation. I'm going to take a piece of fuel tubing again for this one, and I will slip this into place. This takes a wizard hands to keep everything in the right spots, but then I get this right there, slides over the top, and then I hold on to the other shaft, the other side, as I press this on. Again, screwdriver works great, a flat one to use as a spacer there, and to press that tubing nicely over the rod, and thus giving this a nice tight fit. Now I'm installing the control rod for the elevons. In this case, it's the elevon on the right side of the plane. And if you'll see on the tail end of the fuse, there's a kind of a flat spot right at the bottom of the tail block where the tail wheel comes out. That flat spot is basically neutral for the elevator. So if you line up the elevon so that it is neutral with that short flat spot on the tail of the fuse, it will be relatively close to level flight. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to then tighten down the easy link on the servo. So, and that's it. So This is the rudder control rod installation. Since the rudder servo is on the right side of the plane, we'll take our control rod, and you'll see it has kind of a peculiar bend on the end there to make it so that it'll clear properly on the rudder. We'll take that rod and we'll feed it in through the top hole in the push rod guide and slide it forward, and then right up here on the control horn you can just take that and press it down in from the top in any hole that you choose to. In this case I stuck it in the middle hole, and now that is driven back and forth and connects, and it can easily slide through an easy link on the servo arm. This is the landing gear installation. You start with 2 landing gear legs, 2 wheels, 2 main gear wheels, and an O-ring to keep the gear into the plane. So first of all, we're going to pull the piece of fuel tubing that's on the landing gear leg off of that leg, slide a wheel onto the leg, and put the tubing back on over the end. The tubing acts as a retainer, works as good as a wheel collar. It's faster to put on and a lot easier. So anyway, we'll do the same thing with the other leg. We'll remove the tubing, slide the wheel on, and replace the tubing. So works great. And there we have our wheels assembled, our landing gear legs assembled. Now the next thing we'll do is we will install the gear into the plane. So I'm holding the plane upside down here, and I start by putting the tubing over one of the legs, just like that, so that it drops down onto it, and then we can insert that leg into the side of the fuselage. These landing gear legs, they push into a hole there, and then when they go into the middle they actually have to pass by each other. So for some reason you push on one leg and the other one wants to come out, it means you just need to work a little harder at getting them to miss each other in the middle. Now that we have one leg installed and the O-ring across that leg, we take the other leg and run it through the O-ring, and it will then just wrap over the other side of the plane here, and then you can just pivot it up into place, and when it gets into that position, the right place, it'll just snap in, and voila, we have the gear tight in the holes, and the O-ring is keeping it from moving. So that's the main gear installation. The tail wheel, which on the RF kit won't come installed, it has a small plastic retainer that goes on the outside. You slide the wheel onto the tail wheel wire, and then you twist, rock, press that plastic retainer onto the end of the rod or wire, and that retains the wheel. So the tail wheel is free floating, and it will just move with the plane as the rudder turns the plane. So. This is the windshield insulation. First I'm going to peel the windshield decal off of its plate, back paper. We hold the windshield over the plane. This is easier on a table, but so that the front edge is right at the joint. Let's see if I can get an angle here that works. Right at the joint of the nose and the windshield. And once you get it in place, press that down. And first press a lot of pressure across the front before you roll it around the sides. Get that into place, and then grab a side and pull it tight and to the side. Same thing with the other side. You roll it around, stick that label down, and then use lots of finger pressure rolling back and forth so that you get a good adhesion to the surface so that it doesn't work its way loose with heat and over time. So anyway, so there's the windshield. Now we're working on the battery door. This door, we install a piece of foam. It's just got a sticky back foam. We take and we'll peel that away, just like that. And the sticky back foam will just go centered on the door plate on the back of that door. This acts as a pad and pressure against the door, against the battery pack inside the plane, and keeps everything in place. Here I'm installing the Velcro strip on the bottom of the battery compartment, and I'm just going to put it in here just about. I don't want it ahead of the door because it's unlikely the battery will go forward that far. Just find a good spot. Once you do, press it down, and that's where I leave it, right there, just like that, and works great. This is the battery installation. The battery pack is held in place with a piece of Velcro, and I usually put it on the side or the end of the side of the battery pack as shown here, and then I put the loop portion of that, or I guess the hook, this is the loop, I put the hook portion of that on the bottom of the battery tray, and that kind of in the center of the door. This plane usually balances out with the battery somewhere about middle to the front of the door. It of course depends on your weight of your motor and your battery. This is a 3-ounce pack. It's a 1000 mAh pack. That's what I like best in the plane, in 3-cell format, but it can fly with a smaller or a larger pack. There's plenty of room inside the compartment, and the plane doesn't require a ton of amps to move through the air, so a smaller pack works as well. I've flown as small as a 750, it works great. Makes the plane a little bit lighter, and I've flown as heavy as a 1300, so I don't recommend heavier than that. But anyway, battery mounts in here, and then the door goes in like this and slides past, so then there's a catch on the other side. Then you push it in and slide it forward, and it just locks in place, just like that. At that point, everything's solid, nothing's coming out of there, nothing's moving, and it's ready. This is the top wing installation. For this we need 2 pieces of tape. These are specially cut from label material. They stick very well, and they're clear. And then you'll need the 2 magnets that go into the top wing and your top wing. So each of these magnets are quite powerful. Be careful not to snap them together because they can crack. Take one magnet and drop it in the pocket at the back of the wing, the other magnet in the pocket in the front of the wing. Make sure they go all the way down and are seated deeply into the hole. Now these are loose and these are polarized on the sides, so when we put it on the plane, the fuse next, they will snap and turn into the position we want. Then we will put these pieces of tape over the top of those. So then take the top wing after the magnets are in, and you'll slide it down over and set it right in place, and those magnets will self-align and the top wing will snap down to the plane. You can then apply the 2 pieces of tape here and here. Next we'll install the 2 lower wing panels. They also are retained by a magnet in the center. You'll just take and slide it into the socket on the side, and it just slides right into the side of the plane. It's very snug, but there's stops on how far you can go. So that's one side, and we turn the plane around. We take the other one, and we slide it in. Make sure that it's all the way forward before you put the back in, and the whole thing pulls together in the middle. Then we have 2 struts that go on the ends. We put those one on each side. I'm going to put this one on the top wing first, but it doesn't really matter. And I'd slide them until they're just on by just enough that they don't come off, and usually the flush is far enough. So, and then the bottom wing, and we'll just take that one and slide it on there just as well. So, and then we turn the plane around, and we'll do the same thing for the other side. Next, you'll want to balance the airplane. To do this, you can shift the battery location forward and backward in the battery compartment until the plane balances at about 1.5 inches behind the leading edge of the lower wing. You can do that by putting marks here on the bottom at the right spot, and then putting your fingers in those positions and just kind of seeing where the equilibrium comes to. The plane is balanced when the elevons in the tail are level with the horizon. So